You know that feeling. You open your phone. Maybe it is first thing in the morning, before you even say a single word to yourself. And within 30 seconds, you have already seen it. Someone your age, living in a city you always dreamed about, with a career that looks exactly like the one you told yourself you would have by now. Or maybe it is a friend from school who just got engaged. Or someone who launched something, built something, became something, and for a moment, just one quiet, brutal moment, you look at your own life and something inside you collapses. Not because you are unhappy, not because your life is bad, but because suddenly, in that comparison, it does not feel like enough. You are not enough. And here's the thing no one is telling you about that feeling. It is not about them. It never was. What you just experienced is not jealousy. It is not insecurity in the way you have been taught to think about it. What you are actually touching in that small and devastating moment is a wound that was carved into you long before social media existed. Long before you ever saw a highlight reel. Long before you even knew what success meant. This is the deep scar of comparison. And today, we are going to go all the way to the root. Part 1. The measuring machine you never asked for. Here is something that might disturb you at first. Your brain was not designed to feel content. That is not a metaphor. That is neuroscience. Human beings evolved through millions of years of social hierarchy. Your survival, for most of human history, depended entirely on your position within the group. If you were too low on the totem pole, you did not get food. You did not get a mate. You did not get protection. Your brain, in its ancient architecture, learned one critical lesson. Always know where you stand in relation to others. Always be measuring. Always be comparing. Psychologists call this social comparison theory. Leon Festinger introduced it in 1954, but the mechanism is far older than any academic paper. The moment you entered a room, a classroom, a family dinner table, your nervous system was already running its quiet calculation. Am I safe here? Am I valued here? Where do I rank? The problem is not that you compare. The problem is that you were handed a measuring stick as a child, and you never once chose the scale. Think about that. The very first time you learned what it meant to be enough, you were small. You were watching. You were listening to the adults around you, absorbing their definitions of worth like a sponge absorbs water. And those definitions were not neutral. They were loaded. They were about grades, about behavior, about how you compared to your sibling, or your cousin, or the neighbor kid who always seemed to just naturally get it right. Maybe someone said it directly. Why can you not be more like her? Or maybe it was quieter than that. Maybe it was a look, a silence where praise should have been, a celebration that never came when you needed it most. And so, your emotional architecture was built on a foundation that was not yours. You did not design this. You did not choose this. You inherited it. You were handed a blueprint that said, your worth is a moving target, and it is always measured against someone else. Part 2. The armor that became a prison. Now, here is where it gets deeper. Because comparison did not just stay as a feeling. It became a strategy. When you were young, and you started feeling that ache of not being enough, your psyche did something brilliant. It built armor. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we construct to survive in the social world. But underneath every persona is something he called the shadow, the parts of yourself that got buried because they felt too risky to show. Maybe you became the achiever, the one who worked harder than everyone else, not because you loved the work, but because stopping meant facing the silence. And in the silence, the comparison would come rushing in. Maybe you became the minimizer, the one who stopped wanting things too loudly, because wanting and not getting felt more painful than not wanting at all. Maybe you became the cynic, the one who learned to mock ambition before it could mock you, the one who started saying things like, I do not even care about that kind of success, before anyone could point out that you did not have it. These were not character flaws. These were social survival strategies. They were brilliant, adaptive responses to a world that taught you that your inner worth was constantly being evaluated. But here is the tragedy. The armor that protected you then is suffocating you now. Because the same mechanism that helped you survive the comparison of childhood is the mechanism that keeps you scrolling at midnight, chest height, wondering why your life does not look like theirs. The armor has become the prison, and the prison has become so familiar that you have started calling it home. Part 3. The illusion you are actually comparing yourself to. Let us slow down here. Because there is something almost tragically absurd about comparison that nobody says plainly enough. You are not comparing yourself to a real person. You never were. What you are comparing yourself to is a curated highlight reel, yes, but it goes even deeper than that. You are actually comparing your entire internal experience, every doubt, every fear, every 3 a.m. spiral, every moment you felt like you were falling behind, to someone else. External performance. You are comparing the messy, complicated, behind-the-scenes reality of being you to the polished, filtered, public-facing version of someone else. That is not a fair fight. That is not even a real fight. That is a hallucination you are living inside of. Nietzsche wrote about this when he talked about resentment, which is a specific kind of internal poison. It is not just envy. It is the way that chronic comparison causes you to redefine your own values based on what you cannot have. You start wanting things not because they genuinely call to you, but because someone else has them, and their having it makes you feel diminished. And this is the part that should stop you cold. Because when you live in resentment, you are never actually pursuing your own life. You are pursuing a corrective version of someone else. You want the career because he has it. You want the relationship because she has it. You want the body, the followers, the recognition, the peace. Not because they come from your own deep longing, but because their absence is evidence of your inadequacy. You have been chasing a finish line that someone else drew on your map. Part 4. The wound beneath the want. Now, we go to the place most people are afraid to touch. Because underneath comparison, underneath the resentment, underneath the armor and the survival strategies, there is always the same original wound. And it does not look like jealousy. It does not feel like ambition. It feels like grief. It is the grief of a child who was taught, implicitly or explicitly, that love was conditional. That presence was not enough. That who you were was always slightly less than who you were supposed to be. This is what psychologists call conditional worth syndrome. The belief, carved so deep it feels like truth, that your value as a person is something you have to earn, something that can be revoked, something that always exists in comparison to someone else who is earning it better. And the cruel irony of this wound is that nothing external ever heals it. Because the measurement scale is inside you, you could get the promotion and feel nothing but the reminder that someone got promoted younger. You could lose the weight and immediately notice someone who lost more. You could build the business and watch your mind pivot immediately to someone who built it bigger. The inner chaos is not caused by your circumstances. It is generated by a belief system that will never allow you to arrive. No matter what you achieve, the goalpost moves. No matter how far you run, the race restarts. Because the wound is not about what you have or do not have. The wound is about what you believe you fundamentally deserve. And at the deepest level, comparison is never about the other person at all. It is a projection, a mirror. The things that trigger you most sharply in others are always connected to the parts of yourself you have not yet made peace with. Part 5. The darker side of the mirror. Let us go somewhere most videos will not take you. Because comparison does not just make you feel small. Sometimes it makes you feel something you are deeply ashamed of. Sometimes it makes you feel relieved when someone fails. There is a German word for this, Schadenfreude, the pleasure in another person's suffering. And if you have ever felt a flicker of that, even for a half second, even about someone you genuinely love, you have probably spent a lot of energy hating yourself for it. Do not. That flicker is not evidence that you are a bad person. It is evidence that the wound is real. When your sense of worth is built on comparison, another person failing actually does relieve pressure. It is not malicious. It is mechanical. It is the nervous system of someone who has learned that worth is a zero-sum game, briefly exhaling because the scoreboard shifted. And sometimes comparison does not make you feel small at all. Sometimes it makes you quietly contemptuous. You look at someone who has what you want, and instead of feeling the grief of longing, you find reasons why they do not deserve it. They got lucky. They had help. They are not as talented as people think. This is projection in its most painful form. Because the judgment you are making about them is the judgment you are secretly terrified people are making about you. You dismiss them because dismissal feels safer than longing. You tear down because building yourself up feels too exposed, too risky, too vulnerable. What if you try and you still are not enough? Better to decide that enough does not actually exist. Better to decide the whole game is rigged. This is not darkness. This is armor. Armor that has been working so hard for so long that it no longer knows it is armor. It thinks it is just who you are. Part 6. The two paths there are only ever two directions you can move from this place. One is called upward spiral. The other is called a cage. The cage looks like this. You stay inside the comparison loop. You let the measuring machine keep running. You chase the externals, the achievements, the validations, the metrics, believing that one day the number will be high enough that the feeling will finally stop. But it never stops, because you are feeding a system that was never designed to be satisfied. You become more successful and more hollow at the same time. You gain more evidence of your worth from the outside world and feel less worthy on the inside. This is what it looks like to live inside a wound without ever looking at it. The upward spiral looks different. It does not look like positive affirmations. It does not look like a morning routine or a gratitude journal, though those things can be part of it. It looks like something much harder and much quieter. It looks like choosing to become a witness to your own comparison instead of a prisoner of it. The moment you feel that collapse, that particular ache when you look at someone else's life, and feel the familiar shrinking, you do not run from it. You do not numb it. You get curious about it. You ask, what is this actually about? What is the specific belief underneath this specific pain? What does this moment think I deserve? And where did I learn to agree with it? This is not navel gazing. This is excavation. This is the work of pulling the roots of a false belief system out of soil it has been growing in for decades. It is slow, it is uncomfortable, and it is the only thing that actually changes the architecture. Part 7. The radical reframe here is what I want you to sit with. And I mean really sit with, not just nod at. The fact that you feel comparison so deeply is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of depth. People with no inner world do not feel this ache. People who have never longed for something meaningful do not collapse when they see someone else living it. The very sensitivity that makes comparison so painful in you is the same sensitivity that makes you capable of genuine connection, genuine creativity, genuine longing for a life that actually means something. What you are carrying is not a flaw. It is a misdirected fire. The energy that goes into comparison, into measuring, into the quiet grief of not enough. That energy is not wasted energy. It is evidence of desire. And desire, properly understood, is not about what someone else has. Desire, at its purest, is the soul trying to tell you what it actually came here to do. Jung said that everything unconscious gets projected outward, which means the things you envy most in others are your own unlived life staring back at you. The artist you follow, who makes the work that breaks your heart open, is not showing you their life. They are showing you what you have been afraid to become. The comparison is not the enemy. The comparison is a compass. And you have been so busy hating it that you have never thought to ask it, where are you actually trying to point me? You will never feel enough through comparison. That is not a limitation. That is a design. The system was never built to deliver enough. It was built to deliver more, always more, another level, another milestone, another person to measure against. This is the trap, and the exit is not a bigger achievement. The exit is a fundamentally different question. Not, am I enough compared to them? But, enough for what? Enough to do what you actually came here to do. Enough to love the people in front of you. Enough to build something that carries your fingerprints, your particular and irreplaceable vision of what life could be. When you stop measuring yourself against a life that was never yours to live, something quiet happens. The inner chaos begins to settle, not because you have achieved more, not because the comparison thoughts disappear, but because you have removed their power. You have looked at the wound directly, and you have seen it for what it is, a misunderstanding, a child logic that survived long past its usefulness, a survival strategy that forgot to retire when the danger passed. You were never actually in a race. You were standing in a field, watching other people run a race. And you spent years believing that meant you were losing. The mask of inadequacy, that comparison built around you, is not your face. It is not your truth. It is the accumulated weight of every moment. You chose someone else's definition of worth over your own. And here is the terrifying, liberating, ancient truth that everything we have explored today has been circling. You do not become enough by achieving more. You become enough by deciding that the measuring was always the lie. The deepest act of rebellion available to you right now, in a world that profits from your feeling of inadequacy, is to stop, to go still, and to ask yourself, maybe for the first time, what does my life look like when I stop trying to make it look like someone else? That question will not answer itself today, but the fact that you are sitting with it, the fact that something in this touched the part of you that already knows all of this is true, that is not nothing. That is everything. Before you go, I want to ask you something real. Which part of this hit you hardest? Was it the moment you realized your measuring stick was never yours to begin with? Was it seeing your darkest comparison thoughts named without judgment, maybe for the first time? Or was it that final reframe? The idea that the comparison itself might be a compass trying to show you where you have been too afraid to go. Tell me in the comments, because the truth you recognize in yourself today is the beginning of something. And in the next video, we are going to go somewhere even deeper. We are going to explore the psychology of why you keep shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable, and what that habit is actually costing you at the level of your identity. You already know something shifted today. The question is what you do with it next.